The Haunting of the Old Farmhouse, a true story. There's a quiet little farmhouse tucked away on the outskirts of a small rural town, where the roads are long and empty, and the nights are dark. It's the kind of place that invites curiosity, but few dare to approach it. It had been abandoned for decades when the family of the Thompsons decided to buy it in 1985. They were looking for a peaceful life in the country, away from the noise and busyness of city living. But what they didn't know was that the farmhouse had a history that no one was willing to talk about. The house itself was a charming two-story structure, with wide porches and a steep roof. It sat on a sprawling piece of land surrounded by overgrown fields and woods. Despite its age, the house was sturdy, and it didn't take long for the Thompsons to settle in. They loved the quiet of the countryside, and their kids, Jenny and Tim, quickly made friends with the local children. The family began to believe they had made the right decision in leaving the city behind. However, things soon began to feel off. At first, it was small things. Odd noises in the middle of the night, like footsteps in the hallway, or doors creaking open when they were sure they had closed them. But it wasn't just the sounds that troubled them. It was the overwhelming sense that they were being watched. It started with Jenny, the youngest of the children. She would speak of a shadowy figure that she saw in the corner of her room, standing by the window at night. Tim, the older child, dismissed it as his sister's overactive imagination. But Jenny was insistent. "He's always there, in the dark," she would whisper to her parents. They tried to reassure her, telling her it was just her mind playing tricks. But Jenny wasn't the only one who began to feel uneasy. One evening, Mrs. Thompson was sitting in the kitchen when she heard the sound of someone calling her name. "Lily, Lily." The voice was faint but distinct. She froze, certain that someone was in the house. She got up, walked through the living room, and checked the hallway. Nothing. The house was empty. Thinking it was just her imagination, she brushed it off. But then, the phone calls began. Every evening around 8:30 p.m., the phone would ring, and when the Thompsons picked it up, there would only be silence on the other end. Sometimes, they could hear faint whispers, like people talking just out of reach. The caller ID always showed the same number, a local area code, but no name. When they tried calling the number back, there was never an answer. One day, Mrs. Thompson decided to take a walk through the woods that bordered their property. She was trying to clear her head after all the strange happenings, hoping a bit of fresh air would help. As she walked deeper into the trees, she stumbled upon an old, weathered grave marker. It was barely visible through the undergrowth, and the inscription was nearly worn away. However, she could make out the name Thomas Green. Curious, she asked the neighbors about the name, and that's when the unsettling stories began. The Thompsons learned that the land on which their farmhouse was built had a dark past. Many years ago, the farmhouse had been owned by a man named Thomas Green, a hermit who lived alone in the remote house. He was known to be a bit eccentric, but people in the town remembered him for his strange behavior and his obsession with the land. Rumors circulated that he had been involved in occult practices, conducting mysterious rituals in the woods surrounding his property. It was said that he had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and no one knew what happened to him. But the locals all agreed on one thing: the land was cursed. As the days passed, the Thompsons began to experience more disturbing events. Tim started having vivid nightmares about a man with hollow eyes, calling him from the woods. Jenny's sightings of the shadow figure grew more frequent, and it was no longer just standing at the window. It began to move around her room, always just out of her line of sight. The family tried to dismiss it as an overactive imagination, but deep down, they knew something wasn't right. Then, one night, things escalated. Jenny woke up screaming, her eyes wide with terror. She said she had seen a shadow figure standing at the foot of her bed, its hand reaching out to touch her. Mrs. Thompson rushed to her side, but when she entered the room, the atmosphere was too cold for a spring night. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. Terrified, the Thompsons made the decision to leave. They packed their bags and moved out of the farmhouse, never looking back. After they left, the house was once again abandoned, left to decay in the hands of time. To this day, the farmhouse remains empty, standing as a silent reminder of the horrors the Thompsons faced. No one has dared to live there again, and the locals still tell stories of the cursed land and the strange happenings that plagued the Thompsons during their short time there. The phone calls still come through on occasion, though no one picks up anymore. And as for Thomas Green, his grave is still hidden deep in the woods, its stone nearly lost to the overgrowth. But the whispers say he never truly left. And as for Thomas Green, his grave is still hidden deep in the woods, its stone nearly lost to the overgrowth. But the whispers say he never truly left. The farmhouse stands as a chilling testament to the fact that some places, no matter how inviting they may seem, carry with them the weight of dark secrets, and sometimes they are best left undisturbed. This true story has been passed down through the generations, and it serves as a warning to anyone who might be tempted to live in a place with such a sinister past. Sometimes there are things better left untouched.